Good evening, gentlemen, and welcome to Staying Ahead of the Curve, a program of the Padukone Dravid Center for Sports Excellence. This program is made possible with the generosity of our partners, Unix Sunrise, Cult Fit, and the Infosys Foundation, and our academy partners, the Abhinav Bindra Targeting Performance Center, Six Cricket, and the Prakash Padukone Badminton Academy. Welcome, gentlemen. We have Mr. Prakash Padukone, we have Mr. Rahul Dravid, and we have Mr. Abhinav Bindra. Three people you would associate with the concept of trust. Thank you for joining us. Gentlemen, we're dealing with unusual times, a time when we're asked to be suspicious of everything, not trust anyone, not go close to people. But at the same time, trust is so intrinsic to sport, trusting ourselves and our preparation, trusting our equipment, trusting our teammates, and trusting our coaches. And this embedded trust is being challenged every single day, and perhaps even more so socially than we are aware of. So we'd like to discuss with each of you how to address these concepts, how to look at where we are today, and how to be prepared to come back stronger, more positive, and ready to deal with the challenges that are ahead in being well prepared and successful athletes. But first, if I may ask each of you, what is your relationship with risk? I mean, the fact that you've succeeded at sport and risk is the other side of reward. You're clearly all risk takers, but in the little things, would you call yourself a risk taker or would you call yourself on the conservative side? If I may start with you, Prakash sir.
I would say I take calculated risk. I think I've taken quite a few risks, I think in life, in my sporting career. I think I can give you two examples. One was, when I finished my 10th standard, way back in the 70s, when sport was not that popular, there was no money in sport. I had a choice of continuing to play badminton or going to a professional course. I would have got into any of the best engineering or medical colleges, and on sports quota, and but I decided to go against it and took up commerce so that I could pursue my badminton career, because I realized that if I had taken engineering or medicine, it would have been difficult for me to continue playing badminton. So I'm glad that I took that decision, because of which I was able to achieve something in badminton. The second, I think, was much later. After I won the All England in 1980, I got an opportunity to become a professional and move to Denmark as a professional to play for a club. And that time I had a well-settled job with a bank, and my parents were very much against, because I had won 2 international titles before that in 78 and also the All England in 80. So I had got 2 promotions also in the bank. And coming from a middle class family, my parents had got promotions. So I was one of the senior most in the bank at that time. And my parents were very much against. I had to quit the bank to go to Denmark if I were to become a professional. But I took a calculated risk, and because I had won the national title 7 or 8 times then, to excel and to continue to remain at the top, I think the only option for me was to take a risk and move to Denmark. Of course, it had some plus points and minus points, but I have no regrets, because I think on the whole it taught me a lot of things, not just on the court but off the court also. But I would exercise caution and just tell people that you have to not take undue risks. Just because somebody has taken, I think you should weigh all the pros and cons, see what stage you are in your sporting career, weigh very carefully the pros and cons, and then decide.
Rahul, what about you? Can you be a risk taker and succeed at sport? How did you look at yourself when you look at each incremental decision you made with your career, or even ball by ball? What was your way of assessing risk?
I guess if people have watched me bat or followed my career, you wouldn't really call me a risk taker. I spent a lot of time to score a lot of runs, and yeah, it's so. Look, I mean, like Prakash said, I mean, I think there are certain stages in your career when you need to be able to take certain risks, certain so decision making, I think you need to take certain decisions which, probably go against the grain of conventional thinking if you want to really be a successful sportsman. And so, I think my similar story is pretty similar to Prakash's in that sense that I got out of 10th standard with an opportunity to get into any of the engineering colleges in Bangalore. They had good cricket teams at that time as well, and they were quite keen to sort of get me to join one of them. But I like Prakash said, I kind of realized that I would not be able to pursue sports seriously or to the level that I wanted to if I sort of took up engineering. It would have been a lot more complicated for me, at least personally. So I went with commerce. And so in that sense, you sort of the right decision making. So I think sport is like you said in the beginning of your thing, there is a level of risk and reward in sport. But it's also the right decision making, and what are the decisions that you're taking, and training to take those decisions. I think everything that we do, every ball that I face, or every ball a bowler bowls, or you are making decisions, and you're making those decisions on your own. If you're whether you're on a shooting range or whether you're on a badminton court, I think you agree that you're making it whether to drop, whether to dribble, or whether there's countless decisions that you make all the time. And I think it's that training of that decision making that's critically important. It's not, there are always going to be certain personalities which are slightly going to be erring on the side of risk. So say, for example, a Virendra Sehwag in a cricketing context was always going to be more a positive player or more of a risk taker than say someone like me. But it's also the right decisions that you take. I mean, it cannot be risk for the sake of risk. It's got to be the calculated decisions based on the strengths and weaknesses that you possess, the facilities at your control, the strength of the opposition, the weakness of the opposition. So I think that training to make the right decisions is I think very, very critical for good sportsmen. And how do you train that kind of independent decision making, rather than having to look at the coach every single time? I don't think great sportsmen actually need to look at their coaches for every single decision they make.
Abhinav, how about you? What has been your relationship with risk over the course of your career? And have you become any sense different in your relationship with risk since you ended your career?
Well, I think it depends on at what point of time in your career when are you assessing the risk, when as an athlete, I was taking a decision, I didn't perceive it as a risk. But in hindsight, if I look back, me getting into sport was probably the riskiest decision I could ever take in my life. I mean, I was this uncompetitive fat boy with terrible eyes, and I took to the sport of shooting. It was probably the riskiest decision of my life. But at that time, there was something else driving that particular decision, and didn't really weigh the pros and cons of taking it. But I think it was something led by passion, and that's how an instinct. I think we end up taking a lot of decisions, and I ended up taking a lot of decisions which were driven by my gut and by what I felt. Looking back, there were several times in my career where I took very risky decisions, and two of them on the field of play come to my mind were my last shots at the World Championships and at the Olympic Games in 2008. Where I shot a 10.7 and a 10.8 to finish the competition, the last shot of the final. And I think they were incredibly risky shots to take, but I backed myself. I took that leap of faith, and that was a lot of work had gone into being able to take that risk. And that's what my relationship with risk has been, at least during my sporting career. I think for me, it was no risk, no fun. So there were a lot of risks that were taken over a period of time. I went a week before going to the Olympic Games in Beijing. I decided to go on a commando course. I mean, it was a crazy decision because I could so easily have injured myself. But I took that decision, again, driven by something which told me, an inner voice which told me that it was the right thing to do. And that's how I took my decisions. Now, of course, now that I've retired from sport, my mind has changed completely. I'm much more conservative in nature, but that may be just the nature of what I do. And I have to weigh. It's not just about me anymore. I have to weigh it differently, because a lot of lives of other people depend on my decisions. It's much harder, I tell you.
And all three of you, these last few weeks, let's say the 8 weeks, has that internal compass and the voice relating to what risks to take, what risks not to take, have you seen that changing a little bit? Have you felt yourself doubting things that you'd never doubted before? What has that internal compass been like? And what's the greatest risk you've taken? Is it just giving yourself a haircut at home? All of you seem to have got good haircuts though. So. Prakash sir, did you feel anything's changed really in your perception, in the way you make decisions, just even external decisions?
For all of us, it's the first time. It's never happened like this. I don't know whether it will happen again. Because we've never seen this kind of a situation, so we were not prepared. At the most, during our playing career, we were injured and out of action for 6 months or 9 months. But we were never in this kind of a situation. So I think we have to see. There always we have to be very positive and see what best you can get out of a situation. And I think I've become a little more tech savvy. Doing this Zoom interview, which I didn't know before. I'm in touch with some of the coaches of the academy and my other organization. I've addressed 40 or 50 coaches in one go. Even though I've never met them before. So I think we have to look at a lot of opportunities. How we can benefit. Rather than because nothing much you can do about. Because things have happened. So no point, just to keep thinking, when things will get all right. We have to, take one day at a time, and that's what I've tried to do. I try to learn new things. It's been tough, I think, like for everybody else. But I think if you stay positive, try to have a routine. I try to have a routine. So I think I've managed quite a bit, but I think now I'm looking forward, that things will be normal soon.
Rahul, what about you? Did you feel any change in perception, change in the way you are looking at other people, looking at situations?
Well, I think one of the things for me, and it's probably your sporting career has, it's probably helped me a little bit in the sense that, like Prakash said, this is like really unexpected. We kind of heard a few murmurs about it in sort of February and March, but nobody ever expected it to go to this level that, we would lose 2.5, 3 months as of now, as we speak. And you'd be completely not able to do anything. I don't think we ever envisaged that. So it's like, I guess in a sense, it sort of surprises you, but I think, in a sporting career, you kind of get used to facing situations that surprise you or don't go your way, or, a lot of disappointment. So you kind of tend to, in a sense, have an ability to kind of try to make the best of what you've got, and try and make the best of what you have. And I think in some ways that's been a really good learning. So you're kind of used to doing that in sport, but outside of sport, in the career that I am in now, what I'm doing now, finding ways to make the best of a situation like this is obviously not been easy. Like Prakash has said, I think all of us are definitely a little bit more tech savvy after this, and how do you sort of still try and add value to yourself and add value to other people by not being able to actually, go to the ground or go to the academies or go to the NCA, and I think that's been, it's been a good learning, and it's been challenging. There's no doubt about it, and sort of trying to find new ways, but it's also been interesting. It's actually, it's opened your eyes to how much can actually be done. How much can actually be done sitting in your own home, and how much of actual productivity you can do, and how little you actually do need to travel. And kind of, I think after Vijita seen me do a lot of these meetings online, she's sure she's going to question me after all this goes. Why do you need to travel? You can surely do Zoom calls. I think so. It's been a new way of looking at things, but I think the career in sport, wherein you sort of had to always look ahead, in the sense that you had to learn from you had to learn from your sort of disappointments or mistakes and look ahead for the next thing. There's always something ahead. So in that sense, it's yeah, what's ahead outside of this COVID world? How are we going to respond to it? How are we going to react? What are the skills that, I'm going to need, or other people are going to, need outside of this COVID thing? How are we going to manage the situation? So I think your mind is almost thinking like that rather than actually, worrying about what's happened in the past, at least for me, or the fact that these 2 months are lost. So, I think that's been probably, in a sense, a good learning. It's been a good way to also, I think, for everyone, and I telling a lot of some of the cricketers that we were having some conversations with the other day, see it as an opportunity to rest the bodies and rest the minds. We never get that opportunity. You never get that chance. And see it as an opportunity to do that and think about it that if you use these 2 months well or 3 months well, it could elongate your career by 2 or 3 years at the back end of your career, which you might not have had the chance to do if you hadn't had this kind of break. So I think there's a positive in everything, that every situation we find ourselves in. So yeah, so that's sort of been my sort of approach to the whole thing. And in terms of just like risks and stuff, I think the riskiest thing I've done is after 2 months of sitting at home, allowed my wife with a pair of scissors close to my head. So that's after 2 months. 2 months of.
Nandan, I have one more point to add in this.
Sure, sir. Go ahead. Yeah, please.
I think it's important, we say that, we keep our mind occupied, and I think I did a meditation course, Art of Living the course. I would strongly recommend, because I think mental training is one of the things which we neglect. Not necessarily mental training, but yoga or meditation, some breathing techniques. I really find it makes a big difference, especially during these times. So I think I would strongly urge everybody to, whatever they are comfortable with, because you have a lot of time, instead of wasting it, if you can do some of these courses, very basic course, and it takes half an hour a day. At least I find I've suggested to a few other people, a few of my friends. I think they found it extremely useful. So I think in the long run, it could not just during these times, but even otherwise. I don't know whether I would have done it, but for this phase, because I had so much of time. I just happened to
in many ways, it sounds like all of you are approaching the situation as sportsmen as well, in terms of how you would respond to a stage in your career where you have to, in some sense, adapt, change, do something different. Rahul, do you feel like in some sense this changes things in terms of the way you perceive risk on the field once you get back? Do people have to be conscious of not getting overly sort of suspicious, in self-doubt?
Personally, I don't really see that as a huge problem. I don't think that once elite sportsmen actually get on the field and get to doing what they really love, sure, there may be a bit of, there might be when we kind of resume for a short period of time, there may be a sense of, doubt or a fear about certain things. I think we're lucky in that sense that in India, it doesn't seem to have got to a level like, say, the US or parts of Europe, where, you literally, with the kind of numbers that they're seeing, that you literally feel that, every time you touch something, you could eventually end up with, with the disease. So, sure, there will be certain hesitancy when we get back in. Also, there'll be a certain hesitancy, I think, in terms of people's. So one of the challenges will be for a lot of the sportsmen will be to trust their bodies again after 2 months of not playing the sport and the movements that are associated with the sport. So you can do, as much of physical training as you want at home or in the gyms that you have at home. But the actual physical movements of bowling and, they need to be repetitive, and you need to, bat for hours. And I think that takes a toll of your body. So the match fitness and the game fitness, I think that will be a little bit of time before people can confidently trust themselves and go all out. And I think that needs to be factored in. And at least, from a coach's perspective, we are factoring that in, that, and we're trying to sort of, even to associations or boards, trying to tell them that we need to ensure that we give athletes enough time to be able to get match fitness back. Not so worried actually about physical fitness. A lot of the boys are doing it. They're pretty diligent about it. The professionals will try and find a way They'll sort of do stuff at home, but the actual match fitness, the movements that are associated with the actual game, they've not had a chance to do. And 2.5, 3 months is a long time, and the bodies will need. So I think they'll take a little bit of time to trust that and to trust their bodies a little bit. But I think once they've done that for a while and once you've gone through a few sessions, I don't think I think sportsmen should be able to put this behind their back and you say that they should be able to get back to playing the way they were or what's true to their nature.
And Rahul, the question there in terms of this downtime, people certainly are working on fitness. But what about skills? In some sense, you're losing the muscle memory as these time periods get longer and longer. Are you best off just going cold turkey and doing no skills? Or is it fine to be doing, like as a batsman, should you be doing wet tennis ball training with your brother, sister, someone else you can play with? Or is it just fine to wait till you're back and playing at the elite level again? Are you better off trying to push, or are you worse off trying to play at lower levels and not necessarily building the right instincts?
So I don't think you need to worry about it. I don't think it's not a critical element. I think it's, obviously if you do have access to a small facilities, like somebody can throw you a few balls or you have a place where you can, run in and not bowl, at least go through the bowling action. That would be ideal to do, once or twice a week. I mean, there's no harm in being able to do that. Will people actually lose out on skill because they haven't played for 3 or 4 months? At least I can speak from cricket. I can't speak from the other sports, but I don't think that's going to happen in cricket. I mean, actually cricket, if you think about cricket's actually always been a very much a seasonal sport. It's been a sport that's very much a winter sport in India. And in the past, in the summers or in the rainy seasons, in the monsoons, people never played cricket. And it's only now that we play cricket all the time. We have indoor facilities and, we hit balls a lot. But the likes of, Sunil Gavaskar or a G.R. Vishwanath in an era like that, or a Kapil Dev, it was not uncommon for them to have 4 or 5 months off of not, lifting a bat or not picking up a bat. And I mean, I can go back to my own career and think of a couple of instances, and probably there was a lot more cricket during my time, so we didn't have many of those occasions. But there were at least a couple of occasions when I think that I didn't actually pick up a bat for nearly 3 months. And partly one of those instances was because I was injured and I was trying to recover from an injury, and I was sort of told not to sort of pick up the bat for 3 months. I had a tennis elbow and I was trying to sort of, recover from that. You come back and it's like, in a sense, it's like riding a bike. You'll be rusty for a little bit. There's no question about it. You will be rusty, but are you going to forget to bat? Or are you going to forget to bowl? No, I don't think so. In fact, I think if you look at it in the positive, like I said, you'll probably be stronger for it. You'll be, and if you're doing your physical fitness, and like Prakash just said, you're constantly doing your mental training and doing your visualizations and, doing the meditations and keeping yourself mentally fresh. It shouldn't take you long. If you've used the time off well, I don't think it should take you too long to get back to the skill. So I won't worry about it. If people have time and they have some fun and they're getting bored and they want to do some hand-eye coordination work, great, go for it. But if you don't have time, I don't think you need to sweat about it too much. You don't have the space, sorry.
Yeah, so nothing to stress about at this point.
At least from
Abhinav, if I may come to you, you had multiple coaches during your career, some of whom you claim you loved and some of whom you claim you hated more than anyone else. When did you learn to trust, and what made you trust certain people over other people? And how did you maintain those relationships of trust when you were training for some parts of the year with them, many months of the year away from them? Can you talk us through that a little bit?
Yeah, I think I had a couple of sets of coaches, and I had different relationships that I had with them. I think I'll start with Gabby and Heinz, because with them I shared a very close relationship, a very personal relationship, a close bond. From coaches, they grew up to be my friends, and finally family. We discovered a really strong human connection over the years. I would live in their home endlessly, and there I would sleep the sleep of someone who belonged in their house, and mentally, for I trusted them, it was home. I felt a deep kinship with the couple. I trained with them over 18 years, and every time I returned to them with a boy-like enthusiasm, because they always had a new method, a new idea. And the trust came by because they always listened to me, the shooter. They always listened to me, the athlete, not dismissing my concern over a minor detail, as some other coaches might. But they tuned into my feelings, and that was the real reason why I could trust them. And I think that was a fantastic relationship that I was able to forge. But it took time. I think I was somebody who always struggled to trust. I didn't even trust myself. So trusting somebody else was an incredibly tough job for me. But I think it also came by the understanding that these were people who really wanted the best for me. I mean, they would spend countless number of hours, after they did not treat me like a job. I mean, for them, it was a passion. And when I realized that, I think that really opened my eyes, and their trust was born. There was another coach who I worked a long time with, Uwe Riesterer. He I never really had a good relationship with, for he always told me things that I never wanted to hear. I never could really forge a relationship of trust with him, but I always knew that whatever he was trying to say or do was for my better good. It was just a different perspective, which was something that I was not comfortable with at that point of time. However, the information or his point of view had value, and that is the reason how I decided to still work with him. I necessarily didn't really have 100% faith or trust in him, but there was still value in him. But at the end of the day, I think you need to be able to pull down your competitive mask, to unveil your naked, shaking, unsure self with another human being, who's not going to be able to judge you, who's not going to judge you for being imperfect. And that I was able to do with my coaches and my supports, a few of my support staff, and that was something which was very valuable to me. It was very valuable to me in difficult moments, because in difficult moments of a tremendous amount of stress, tremendous amount of pressure, I needed to trust somebody when I could not really trust myself, and I could not find that trust from within. I had to lean on to somebody, and that came by over time. It did not happen overnight, but it came over time. But with the realization that they wanted the best of me, and they were with me despite the eventual result at the end of the day.
Fascinating. And Prakash, just taking up from that in terms of coaches, coaches give so much knowledge, respite, and that notion of kinship for athletes. And it's been a very challenging few weeks for coaches and the community of coaches. Many challenging livelihoods, many great amount of uncertainty, and we're going to expect them to be turning up with their 100% on the day we restart operations. But have we forgotten our coaches in the last few weeks? And is there something the system really needs to think through in terms of getting these essential people in the system a little bit more empowered?
I think so, Nandan. I think most people, the general public, still not aware of the advancement of sports. I think 5 to 10 years back, sports was something very different. It was more of a pastime. Almost everybody had to have a job, or a business, and then sports was, a part-time thing. But I think I would say over the last 5 to 8 years, sports has changed so much that in almost all the sports, people have taken up sports full time. I'm not talking of even post-retirement. I'm talking of not during the playing career. A lot of the sports people who have represented the country, who represented the state in all the sports, who earlier, like 10 years back, had a job. A lot of them have given up jobs depending on sports, full time, coaching. Similarly, the trainers, the psychologists, nutritionists. A lot of people are depending now on sports alone, which was not the case, 10 years back. So not many are aware of this. And unfortunately, we don't have a platform. All these people, they do not have a platform to to approach the government and to. I think that's very unfortunate because to put forth their case. Uh, I would say there'll be thousands, maybe close to 1 million coaches, all the sports put together, who are dependent only on playing sports. It's a very highly unorganized sector. Not many people are aware. Everybody else, the industry, they have their own body. The farmers have their own association, platforms. But the sports, including sports dealers, probably also have, CII or somebody to fall back on. But the sports fraternity, the coaches and the support team, gradually, because these days, we know that apart from the coaches, the coaches just form one of the pillars of the support team. Then we have the video analyst, we have the nutritionist, we have trainers, we have physiotherapists, we have psychologists. So they all, a lot of them, are now dependent only fully on sports. So I think the government needs to keep this in mind, and the livelihood of so many people, depend on sports. But I think they are not. They still probably, a lot of the general public and the government probably still feels, sports is, there are not too many people involved. So I think it's a wrong notion. So I would, really hope that the government takes this seriously, and wherever possible, of course, all precautions need to be taken, but gradually, wherever it is possible, to open up slowly, so that the the needs of the sports support fraternity is taken care of.
Thank you, Prakash. And Rahul, what are the questions your young cricketers and your fellow coaches and support staff are asking you, and how are you responding to them at these times with the prevailing uncertainty?
So I think a lot of the questions sort of are around. So I think it's different. Obviously, there are questions around, in a certain sense, the uncertainty of the future, of when we are going to be able to actually start and when we're going to be able to compete. And like I answered in the earlier question, a lot of the questions are also around the doubt of, what will happen to my skill, what will happen to my fitness, am I falling behind? So yeah, I think from a sportsman's perspective, those are the sort of the big questions that we've had to address. From the coach's perspective, like Prakash sir rightly said, I mean, we have a lot of coaches, and I think the problem is really, it's sort of, it's a lot bigger at the grassroots level, wherein a lot of the coaches are very dependent on, they're very dependent on these summer camps. I mean, we've lost the summer, we've lost a very big part of the summer. And a lot of our coaches, a lot of the academies at the grassroots level are very, very, especially for outdoor sports, they're very dependent on the summer, because that's when the children have holidays, and that's when they can play the sport. And, it's really a time when a lot of them make a lot of their living that sort of sustains their passion through the year. Even at an NCAA level, there are a lot of the coaches who coach in our domestic system who rely on our NCAA, ZCA camps as something that, gives them a fillip and allows them to take the courage of being able to give up full-time jobs to be able to do coaching, so that they know that the revenue comes in these 2 or 3 months, which sort of looks after them throughout the year. So with that not happening, I think there's a lot of doubt and uncertainty as to what is going to happen. I think the only thing that we've tried to do is to try and reassure them that, in the best possible way, we will try and ensure that we can do what's best possible for a lot of these coaches. Try to put in some level of personal developmental programs, whether it's been sort of webinars and coaching, interactions with sort of senior coaches. Try to create platforms through things like this, which have sort of given them something, at least, that when they come back out of it, they try and encourage them to learn new skills, which hopefully will then will help them once this whole thing is out. But yeah, I think it is a challenging time and a tough time, and there are no easy answers to situations like this. Especially in the grassroots level. I mean, I think at the top level, a lot of the coaches are fine. They'll probably be well looked after. They'll manage. But it's at the grassroots level that like there are no easy answers in any profession at this point of time. And the sporting fraternity is no different. And it is a fraternity. It is an industry today, like Prakash sir mentioned. And it's something that needs to be recognized that there are people whose livelihoods and sustenance depends on this industry, and it depends on coaching, and they form the pool in which we select our elite cricketers. So all of our elite cricketers or elite sportsmen, for that matter, come from these grassroots, come from these small coaching centers, and they're very critical that some way that we try and ensure that they, through these difficult times, that they can sustain themselves, they can manage themselves, so that they are able to resume pretty well once we pass.
And the same with multiple people who might be vulnerable, from groundsmen to caddies to ball boys. There's a
Absolutely.
community no one's really thinking of at this point, right?
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that's it is quite tough for a lot of those people, because they do come from, if I may say so, not all of them, but a lot of them would come from sort of unskilled labor, so to speak. So there's not a lot else they can look forward to. So there's not much else a groundsman can do if he's got to rely on this, or and I think that's and it's going to be very difficult for him to learn a new skill at this stage in his career. A lot of our groundsmen, for example, are people who don't have degrees or qualifications, but they've been in the industry for 10, 15 years and been making pitches and wickets and grounds for 10, 15, 20 years, some of them. And so they're very good at what they do. But, there's not much else that they can do. So I think, being careful and managing them through this is very, very important.
Thanks. Abhinav, if I may come to you, you spent 22 years on your career, didn't have too many breaks, but one of the big breaks was after 2004 and Athens, right? Where you did well, but you found that there was a loose tile below your shooting position, and that was a hugely challenging mental time. So you took a few months away from the sport and came back and rebuilt. Can you talk us through that rebuilding process? How long did you stay away from the sport? How did you rebuild your mental game in some sense and learn to trust yourself in many ways?
Well, I think that, Athens was something interesting because I was coming out of a huge failure. I was coming out of the world collapsing around me, and the world ending around me. So it was a depressive sort of environment, mindset that I was in, and more than the skills and more than the shooting, I just had to first come back mentally, in the sense, just get my normalcy and sanity back, and that came with time. I think for me at that time, that was an area. You talk about a period which had disappointment around it. So it was time was the best healer. And with time, I started to miss the boring and the mundane again. And the boring and the mundane was to go back to the shooting range and to just start getting into the process of shooting again, and to start just training again. And once that feeling came back, it just came back naturally. But I think for me, I think you were talking just now about skills and this, that, and the other, and the possibility of athletes losing muscle memory and things like that. I think the concerns may be with certain sports in India, when we talk specifically about, say, in certain sports like shooting, where we have a lot of young athletes who really not had so much experience in their careers. They've only been shooting for 5-6 years, and even less, and they've made it to the Olympic team. There is definitely a serious concern on things like muscle memory, because 3-4 months out of action in a very, very short career, you just don't have enough of a workload which has happened. There may be certain concerns, but I think for the older athletes, it can also be looked at in a positive way, because over time you also develop a lot of bad habits, and sometimes unlearning them means just time away from sport and time away from practicing those skills. And that was exactly what happened was when I was injured in 2006, and when I spent a considerable amount of time, probably even longer than my Athens experience, outside of the shooting range, just trying to build myself physically again, to be able to lift the rifle again. And there, the positive, what my experience was that, I had developed a few bad habits, and, I was away from the shooting range, practicing those skills, and I had the opportunity to restart afresh in a certain way and forget those bad habits. And hopefully for the older athletes, they can use this period as an opportunity to do just that. I think when they come back, I think they could come back very with a certain degree of freshness, as long as they are keeping themselves mentally stimulated during this time. I think that is a big challenge where you don't really have much of an opportunity to do much. On the other hand, they keep talking in business that there is a lot of pent-up demand. There's probably a lot of pent-up demand to get back on the field of play for athletes. So I think you have to find the positives in the circumstances, and you have to find. I think the most important thing for me, looking at this current situation, is to really be mentally in a good shape. I think you have to keep yourself mentally stimulated and mentally sharp. And sometimes that, you will be surprised, you can probably never get that from doing exactly things related to your sport. You'd be surprised how much energy and freshness you could actually bring in by using this time to develop a new skill or to develop something just far away from your sport. But when you do actually come back to your normal routine, you will come back with a higher degree of freshness. And I think that's what athletes should try and do at this point of time.
And Abhinav, what's your advice? I think you're aware of the wider Olympic community as well globally. Perhaps people are not just dealing with sporting challenges, but they might be dealing with significant challenges at home. It could be financial security of the family. It could be the ill health of someone else. How does one shut out all of that and remain focused with still 14 months to go for Olympics, staying on course, not letting sort of the headwinds? And like I think we've talked about many times in the past, there are athletes all over the world who might end up losing jobs, who might end up not necessarily having adequacy of support to a 2021 Olympics. Maybe they were fine until July or August. What is your advice for some of these in just staying the course?
Well, I think, to answer the financial side of it is obviously challenging because, there are so many in the Olympic world, there are so many different countries and so many 206 national Olympic committees involved in the whole process. But I think this crisis is sort of a reminder that, as athletes, playing the sport is sometimes a privilege, it is a luxury. And we should be, as athletes and everybody involved in sport should be grateful. And, we are really, we should really be grateful for the opportunity that we have had in the past and which we will have in the future to be able to just go out there and play a sport. I think it's a real privilege to be able to do that, and to represent your country is even a higher privilege. And I think that is something which should be motivation enough to keep you going. Of course, there could be challenges outside the field of play, and I think it is again a reminder, an important reminder in life. I think that as athletes, we tend to live in a bubble of sorts, and sometimes as former athletes continue to live in that bubble. But for most athletes, that you have to come out of that bubble at some point of time. And this is just a great reminder that there's much more to life than just sport. And again, it is about exercising that degree of gratitude that we must continue to have when we are able to come back to play, or to have the opportunity to compete again, or just to be involved in sport. But I think it is also a great reminder for athletes, at least the amateur athletes, who at some point of time are kind of guilty of putting all the eggs in one basket and just focusing completely on one dimension in life. It is, I think, a great reminder that focusing on a dual career at times is equally is a very important thing. And as sport develops in various parts of the world, and as sport specifically develops in India, this should be a great reminder that as we will have more younger people getting into sport, we will also have more people failing in sport, because that's just the nature of what sport is. And we must be considerate of this fact, and we must remember that we must set processes and systems in place which and an environment in place which focuses on a dual career, which focuses on dual skill building, because there will be difficult moments, there would be there would be failures that young athletes will encounter. Many more won't make it, most probably won't make it, and they have to have a fallback option. And I think this crisis is a fantastic reminder for all of us to really be concerned about this for the future, and work on it and try and set some processes in place.
What a wonderful message, Abhinav. Thank you. Prakash sir, I think you've been always the flag bearer of saying never complain, do the best with what you have. So how can we do the best with what we have of this difficult situation? And how does one take that to the courts when you come back? How do coaches turn up again? I think you had a career in which the little things actually didn't bother you. You just went for the bigger things. You sort of trained by yourself. You used your own devices. What are the skills one needs to cultivate to remain resilient through these times? What did you learn from yourself and your career?
Well, I think just ask oneself. I think realize much later. Whether whatever happens, whether it is in your control. Every time situation comes, whether it's a selection, whether it is failure, whether it's a victory, whether it is an opportunity to practice. You just ask yourself whether it's in your hands, whether it's in your control. And if the answer is yes, then then go all out and do it. If the answer is no, then don't even think about it. So it's as simple as that. Like now this break, is it in our control? No. The opening of centers, is it in our control? No. Do we know when we'll be able to get back on the court or on the field? No. So no point even thinking about it. So whatever is in our control, like I said, keep yourself occupied. Whatever is possible, be very positive. Whatever is possible, from within your home, keep doing keep physically fit. Whatever possible, keep mentally strong, and wait for the opportunity, and try to be very positive. I think that's the simple method which I follow. Not just
Thank
during
you.
my sporting career, even afterwards.
Thank you. Rahul, just to conclude here, in team environments, you talk a lot about the importance of camaraderie, sort of trusting your teammates, enjoying their successes, them enjoying yours. During this time, you've seen a bunch of them doing these Instagram lives, sort of keeping it lively and fun. What are the ways in which teams, the people in team sports, can continue to cultivate the camaraderie and keep the flock together in many ways till everyone's back physically together?
Yeah, so that is a really good point, and I think one of the ways is a couple of ways. Obviously, communication is a really big way. I mean, I think staying connected in times like this with people who you I think really love, or people who you maybe not have the time to stay connected with. I think that's one of the things that's probably this couple of months has given us the opportunity to reflect on, and I think you have so much time on your hands, and with the technology available today, I think staying connected with people is not as difficult as it used to be in the past. And I don't think physical proximity is any barrier to communication, as we're just seeing on this, on this webinar or on this chat. I think you can converse, you can talk with people, you can see them, which is, I think again a blessing, and something that we have to be grateful about. And I think this has given, people an opportunity to really definitely reflect on and actually, in a sense, situations like this or events like this, give you the opportunity, make you maybe think and reflect on, the many people that you probably didn't stay in touch with. I mean, the number of messages that I guess have gone back and forth on WhatsApp or on many of these social groups in terms of finding about people's well-being, of maybe people who you haven't connected with that closely in the past. And I think this has given us an opportunity to be able to do that. So similarly in teams, I think having that level of communication amongst teammates, whether it's, and not just, communicating about your sport, but I think when you're not playing the sport, I think this gives you an opportunity to communicate with people at slightly different level than say just about, tactics and strategy and what are you doing for fitness and what's happening in the next match and how we're going to tackle that bowler. That's one level of conversation. But I think this is, as we're seeing, like you rightly said, through a lot of social media, a lot of the boys are beginning to connect with their teammates in slightly different ways. And I think that's going to bear fruit when they all get together. You get to know people a lot better. So it's sometimes really surprising how, when you're in the heat of battle and when you're playing together in a team and you're competing and you're practicing and playing, how little you actually know some of your teammates. It's actually sometimes surprising. People get surprised because you're sort of with them so much and so often. But a lot of your conversations are at a very, or sort of on a sporting level or on a very professional level, so to speak. It's not very often, and only with a few, maybe you get to a personal level. But I think this gives you the opportunity to maybe get to know some of your teammates in a lot better. And I think that really needs to be encouraged in a lot of team sports, where teams are going to come together. So that's one way. And the other way is to ensure that, a lot of the conversations that we probably don't have the opportunity to do in team sports, and, maybe getting together on platforms like this to discuss some of these things that maybe as a team during the course of the competition or during the course of winning games and competing, you haven't had the opportunity to discuss, topics that you could bring forward. The teams would have the opportunity to share their ideas, thoughts, so on. And if done well, I think this really gives us the chance and an opportunity to I think get to sort of understand topics in areas that probably you wouldn't cover if you probably wouldn't have the time to cover if you were playing competitively in a team all the time or preparing for a competition.
Thank you so much, gentlemen. Unfortunately, we're running out of time here. Could have gone on for much, much longer, but thank you for sharing all your wisdom and your positivity. I think the one thing that gives me hope in this time of doom and gloom is that there are people like the three of you leading sport, working with young athletes and giving them the tools and then the methods that are necessary to deal with these unusual times. Thanks once again to our partners, Yonex Sunrise, Cult Fit, and the Infosys Foundation, as well as our academy partners, Abhinav Bindra Targeting Performance Center, Six Cricket, and the Prakash Padukone Badminton Academy for enabling this discussion. It's been a wonderful, wonderful opportunity to talk to three legends of Indian sport. We hope you've enjoyed it, and please continue to stay ahead of the curve. Thank you and good night.